And one of the sectors that will be hardest hit as a result of the Puerto Rican debt crisis is education. For more now on this situation, we're going to turn live to David Diaz Munoz, an educator and recent graduate of San Francisco State University, and he joins us from California. David, thanks so much for joining us. You were born and raised in Puerto Rico, and you have worked extensively in education. So what is being proposed in terms of cuts there, and how will that affect ordinary citizens on the island?
So most recently, and thank you for having me on the program, most recently you have actually student protests that actually helped us stop one of the largest cut proposals. It was proposing to cut 20% of the budget to education, and students and their supporters were able to protest to stop Garcia Padilla from actually implementing that. But that actually led to the imposition of the value-added tax. Now what you're seeing is just hedge funds asking for public schools to be closed down and for education spending to be lowered, despite the fact that Puerto Rico spends on average per student $8,400, and that's well below the U.S. national average, which is $10,667. So recently, what you have is just these billionaire hedge fund managers calling for the layoff of teachers and the closing of schools because of the massive migration of folks leaving. But what that does is it creates a lot of disparity between private and public education. And public education in Puerto Rico is already suffering. The starting salary for a teacher in Puerto Rico is $20,000. The highest 10% of teachers make $41,000. So you're talking about a population that's already not making enough money. The teachers aren't making enough money, and the students aren't having enough money being spent on them. And as a result, the public education is really, really struggling. But what you're seeing is a lot of young activists who are looking to better this situation, and they're doing it through the University of Puerto Rico. Students are very active, and their parents and their families are very supportive, and that's how they've been able to kind of control the situation. But we'll see what happens down the road.
Let's open it up a bit and talk about the crisis in general. Especially, I wanted to ask you about the United States' role in the situation. Now, has the United States offered any assistance to the island whatsoever?
No, this is what's crazy to me, right? It's a lot of this debt is due to these cabotage laws that were passed by the Jones Act in 1920, right? And you heard Juan Gonzalez say in Democracy Now! That as a result of this, we actually, if the cabotage laws were reversed and the United States assumed responsibility, the total from 1920 to now that we spent on the merchant marines would actually be in excess of $75 billion, which would be enough to pay off the debt, the supposed debt that we owe the United States. But they're not offering anything in the way of, of declaring bankruptcy and trying to consolidate the debt so that we can actually pay it off.
All right, Mr. Diaz Munoz, thanks so much for joining us and providing some insight into what is the debt situation in Puerto Rico.